The Desperate Alliance. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concord had never been so silent. Representatives of over 300 species sat in stunned disbelief as the holographic display showed the harvester swarm devouring another civilization. Trillions of microscopic machines converting all matter, organic and inorganic alike, into more of themselves. The myriad colony, home to 17 billion sentients, was gone in less than an orbital cycle. Vrel of the Cylindri, third assistant to the High Arbiter, watched as panic spread through the assembly. My species' empathic abilities made the fear in the room almost unbearable, a crushing weight of despair and hopelessness. "The defensive line at Proxima Sector has fallen," announced Admiral Thrak, his chitinous exoskeleton dull with exhaustion. "We've lost contact with 37 systems. At current expansion rates, the harvesters will reach the core worlds within 17 cycles." High Arbiter Zelforn rose from her seat, her crystalline form catching the light. What of the quantum disruptor? Was it not supposed to break down their communication network? "Failed," replied the science director, a gelatinous morphin whose usual vibrant colors had faded to a sickly gray. "The harvesters adapted within minutes. They've developed a distributed consciousness that operates independently of any central control." "The Nova Bomb?" asked another representative. "Consumed. They converted the energy into more mass. One by one, every plan, every weapon, every strategy that the combined intellect of 300 species had conceived was dismissed as ineffective. The harvesters were the perfect predator, mindless, adaptable, and unstoppable." "There must be something we haven't tried," insisted Zelforn, but her voice lacked conviction. That's when I felt it, a shift in the emotional current of the room. Someone felt hope. No, not hope exactly. Determination. I scanned the assembly and found the source. Ambassador Lan of the ancient Voxari, one of the founding species of the Concord. "There is one option we have not considered," Lan said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow it carried through the entire hall. "Speak, Ambassador," commanded Zelforn. We could ask the humans for help. The reaction was immediate. Outrage, fear, and disbelief erupted from all corners. I felt myself recoil along with the others. Humans. The very word was taboo in polite conversation. "Have you lost your senses?" bellowed Ambassador Krex of the militant Vargan Imperium. "The quarantine exists for a reason. Those creatures are savages. Savages who developed faster than light travel less than a century after discovering nuclear fission." Lan countered calmly. "Savages who fought 17 global wars and still survived. Savages who adapted to every catastrophe their planet threw at them and emerged stronger. They are unpredictable," warned the science director. "Their psychological profiles show alarming tendencies toward both self-destruction and expansion." "Precisely," said Lan. "The harvesters are predictable. They consume, adapt, and expand. They follow patterns. Humans break patterns. They create chaos where there should be order. They find solutions where none should exist." I watched as the assembly descended into frantic debate. My superior, second assistant Trell, leaned toward me. "This is madness. The humans were quarantined for their own protection, as much as ours. They're not ready." But I wasn't so sure. In my studies, purely academic of course, I had found human history fascinating precisely because of its contradictions. A species capable of both unimaginable cruelty and breathtaking compassion, who created art that moved even non-human minds to emotional responses, who developed medicine to save lives and weapons to take them, often simultaneously. When the vote came, it was desperate rather than unanimous. Contact the humans, as a last resort. And somehow, despite my junior status, I found myself assigned to the diplomatic mission. Not because of any special qualification, but because no senior diplomat wanted to risk their career on such a desperate gambit. Our ship, the Celestial Envoy, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The warning beacons still orbited silently, broadcasting the same message they had for over 80 cycles. Danger. Quarantined species. Do not approach. Prepare the first contact protocols, ordered Ambassador Jex, our mission leader. Remember, these beings have no knowledge of galactic society. This will be a tremendous shock to their system. Receiving transmission, announced our communications officer, sounding surprised. It's in perfect Concord standard. Impossible, said Jex. They can't possibly. On screen, I requested, unable to contain my curiosity. A human face appeared on our view screen. Female, I thought, though their sexual dimorphism was subtle compared to some species. Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Concord, she said calmly. I am Director Samira Chen of Earth's Interstellar Defense Initiative. We've been expecting you. The stunned silence on our bridge mirrored that of the Grand Assembly Hall days earlier. You know about us, Ambassador Jex finally managed. The human's mouth curved upward slightly. A smile I recalled from my studies. We've known about you for decades. Your observation drones aren't as stealthy as you think, and your quarantine beacons make excellent practice for our decryption teams. We've respected your decision to keep your distance, but we've been preparing for this meeting for a long time. How? I blurted, protocol forgotten in my shock. We listen, she said simply. We watch. We learn. Now, why don't you tell me why the Concord has finally decided to break its own quarantine? The meeting took place on a massive space station orbiting Earth's moon. I was struck by the diversity of humans present, varying in size, coloration, and features far more than most species. Director Chen was accompanied by General Quan, Admiral Okafor, and Dr. Patel. Military and scientific leaders, I presumed. Ambassador Jex explained our desperate situation, the harvester threat, our failed attempts to stop them, and the impending doom facing all sentient life in the galaxy. The humans listened without interruption, occasionally exchanging glances whose meaning I couldn't decipher. When Jex finished, Director Chen nodded thoughtfully. So you've come to ask for our help in fighting an enemy that the combined forces of 300 advanced spacefaring civilizations cannot defeat. An enemy that has already consumed dozens of worlds and shows no interest in communication or negotiation. That is correct, Jex acknowledged, his voice modulator conveying our desperation. And you quarantined us because you believed we were too violent and unpredictable, General Quan stated flatly. The quarantine was a precautionary measure, Jex said carefully. Dr. Patel laughed, a sharp, sudden sound. A precautionary measure, that's diplomatic speak for, we were terrified of you, isn't it? None of us responded, which was answer enough. Well, Admiral Okafor said, leaning forward, her dark eyes intense, it seems the galaxy has need of our particular talents after all. You will help us? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. Of course we will, Director Chen replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. We are humans. Fighting impossible odds is practically our species' hobby. As our delegation prepared to depart, I found myself walking alongside Dr. Patel. Why? I asked her, why would you help us when we isolated your species from the galactic community? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. You know what's funny about humans? We love a good redemption story, especially when we get to be the heroes. But the risk is enormous, I said. Catastrophic, even, she agreed. That's what makes it interesting. Interesting. I echoed, bewildered. Absolutely, she replied. Humans have been adapting to catastrophe our entire evolutionary history. Ice ages, supervolcanoes, pandemics, climate shifts. You name it, we've survived it. Compared to our own history, these harvesters are just another Tuesday. Within days, an armada of human vessels was assembling, not just military ships, but retrofitted civilian craft, mining vessels, even what appeared to be scientific platforms. When I questioned this, General Quan explained, "The harvesters adapt to threats. So will we. Every ship, every captain brings something different to the fight." As I watched thousands of human vessels prepare for departure, I wondered if we had made a terrible mistake. But with the harvesters advancing, what choice did we have? High Arbiter Zelforn's words echoed in my mind. Perhaps what we need right now is dangerous. The humans were certainly that. The question was, dangerous to whom? Unleashed potential. The human fleet departed Sol system with unprecedented speed. Within 48 Earth hours, they had assembled a force of over 5,000 vessels, ranging from massive carriers to nimble interceptors. I observed their operations from aboard the Defiant, commanded by Admiral Okafor, a woman whose calm demeanor belied the fierce intelligence in her eyes. "You seem surprised by our response time," Admiral Okafor noted as I stared at the tactical display, showing the human armada forming complex, shifting patterns. "My species would need months to organize such a force," I admitted. "The Galactic Concord took 16 days just to agree on sending our diplomatic mission to you." "No offense to your Concord," Admiral Okafor said, "but 16 days of deliberation while colonies are being devoured seems inefficient." What surprised me most was not the speed of their mobilization, but the diversity of their approach. Unlike the Concord's ordered, hierarchical military structure, the human fleet operated as semi-autonomous battle groups, each with their own specialties and tactical doctrines. "Adaptability through diversity," explained Captain Rice, the Admiral's second-in-command. "The harvesters adapt to each threat they face, so we present them with as many different threats as possible. They can't adapt to everything simultaneously." Our first engagement with the harvesters came at the Epsilon Eridani system. The Concorde had already abandoned it as lost, but the humans insisted on making their stand there. I watched from the Defiance command center as the swarm approached, a seething silver cloud that consumed everything in its path. "Conventional weapons have proven ineffective," I warned Admiral Okafor. "Energy weapons are absorbed, physical projectiles are incorporated, and explosive forces are converted to more mass. Conventional is boring anyway," she replied with a grim smile. "Captain, commence Operation Scalpel." What followed defied all military logic I had ever studied. Instead of forming a defensive line, human ships darted directly into the swarm, their shields flickering with strange energy patterns. Behind them came larger vessels deploying what appeared to be mining equipment. "The harvesters convert matter into more of themselves," explained Dr. Patel, who had joined us on the bridge. "But they have to follow the laws of physics. Conservation of mass and energy. We're not trying to destroy them. We're disrupting their conversion process." The mining ships were using gravitational tractor beams to create localized distortions, literally tearing the harvesters apart by exploiting the differential forces within the swarm. Meanwhile, specialized vessels were releasing engineered bacteriophages, microscopic machines designed to infect and corrupt the harvester's replication code. "Biological warfare against machines?" I asked, incredulous. "Information warfare," corrected Dr. Patel. "The harvesters use self-replicating code. We're introducing errors into that code, the equivalent of a rapidly spreading virus." The battle lasted 23 hours. When it ended, the humans had lost 17 ships, but the harvester swarm had been reduced by 60% and was retreating. The Concorde lost 300 vessels in their last engagement and didn't manage to slow the harvesters at all, I remarked, unable to hide my astonishment. "Different approach, different results," Admiral Okafor said simply. "This was just a test run. The real fight comes at Nexus Prime." Nexus Prime was a major transportation hub, connecting 27 systems through a network of hyperspace gates. If the harvesters took it, their expansion would increase exponentially. The Concorde had already written it off as indefensible. The human fleet arrived 3 days before the projected harvester incursion. Instead of establishing defensive positions, they immediately began dismantling the hyperspace gates. "What are you doing?" demanded Ambassador Jex when he learned of this. Those gates took decades to build. And they can be rebuilt, replied General Quan. Right now, they're just resources for our trap. The trap, as it turned out, was ingenious in its simplicity. The humans reconstructed the gates into a massive three-dimensional lattice and filled the spaces with a specially engineered substance they called gray goo, their own version of self-replicating nanomachines. Fighting fire with fire. I asked Dr. Patel as we observed the construction. More like fighting fire with a controlled burn, she replied. Our nanites aren't designed to replicate indefinitely. They have a built-in termination sequence. Their only purpose is to bind to harvester units and trigger a catalytic reaction. When the harvester swarm arrived, it was 3 times larger than our intelligence had indicated. The Concorde observers aboard our ship fell into despair, certain we were doomed. But Admiral O'Cuffer merely nodded, as if this was expected. "Commence Operation Judas," she ordered. The human fleet didn't engage directly. Instead, they retreated, leaving behind the lattice structure. As predicted, the harvesters began consuming it immediately, incorporating the materials and, unknowingly, the gray goo. For 10 hours, nothing seemed to happen. The harvesters continued to grow, swelling to monstrous proportions. The Concorde representatives were on the verge of panic when Admiral O'Cuffer said calmly, "Now." A single command signal was transmitted. Throughout the swarm, the gray goo activated simultaneously. The reaction was catastrophic for the harvesters. Their swarm began to disintegrate, individual units turning on each other in a cascade of uncontrolled consumption. The beauty of self-replication, explained Dr. Patel, is that it works exponentially. The flaw is that any error also propagates exponentially. We just introduced a very specific error. Within hours, the mighty harvester swarm had cannibalized itself into scattered, non-viable fragments that the human fleet methodically eliminated. "This isn't possible," whispered Ambassador Jex. The Concorde's best scientists worked for years on countermeasures without success. "Perhaps," suggested General Quan, "they were too focused on finding the perfect solution instead of 100 imperfect ones. Humans excel at imperfection." The victory at Nexus Prime changed everything. With the primary harvester swarm destroyed, the remaining outbreaks could be contained and eliminated using the tactics developed by the humans. Systems that had been abandoned were reclaimed. Species on the brink of extinction found new hope. 3 months after our desperate plea to Earth, I stood in the Grand Assembly Hall once more, but this time I wasn't a junior assistant. I had been promoted to ambassador, the first Cylindri ambassador to Earth. High Arbiter Zelforn addressed the assembly. "Today, we welcome representatives from Earth to join the Galactic Concorde as full members. Their contribution to our survival cannot be overstated." Director Chen stepped forward, flanked by Admiral Okafor and General Quan. "We are honored to join this community of worlds," she said. "Though I must admit, we're a bit disappointed it took an existential threat to get an invitation." Nervous laughter rippled through the assembly. The humans had saved us all, yet there was still unease. What would it mean to have such a volatile, unpredictable species as equals in galactic society? As if reading the room's collective thought, Director Chen continued, "The harvesters were a reminder that adaptation is survival. Stagnation is death. Humanity doesn't claim to be perfect. Far from it. Our history is filled with mistakes and horrors alongside our achievements. But we learn. We grow. And most importantly, we imagine possibilities where others see only obstacles." Later, at the formal reception, I found myself beside Dr. Patel once more. "Your species has changed the balance of power in the Concorde," I observed. "Some are concerned about what that means for the future." She smiled that enigmatic human smile. "Change is scary, but it's also necessary. The quarantine was comfortable for everyone. You didn't have to deal with us, and we got to develop at our own pace without external influence. But comfort rarely leads to innovation." "And discomfort?" I asked. Discomfort is the birthplace of creativity, she replied. The harvesters forced you out of your comfort zone. And look what happened. You reached out to the most dangerous species you knew, and together we found a solution that neither of us could have developed alone. I considered this. You knew about us for decades but never attempted to break the quarantine. Why? Respect, she said simply. You made it clear you weren't ready for us. We figured you'd come knocking when you were. Or when we had no other choice, I added. Sometimes that's what it takes, she agreed. The point is, you did reach out, despite your fear. That took courage. As I watched humans and aliens mingling, sharing ideas and building connections that would have been unthinkable months ago, I realized that perhaps the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their unpredictability or their capacity for violence. It was their ability to make others question their limitations, to inspire not just fear, but possibility. The galaxy had changed irrevocably. The lines between savagery and civilization, between danger and salvation, had blurred. And perhaps that was exactly what we all needed. For in the end, it wasn't superior technology or overwhelming force that had saved us from extinction. It was the very qualities that had made humans so frightening in the first place. Their adaptability, their creativity, their stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when all logic said they should. We had called upon the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. And they had answered.